You are a cultural pioneer, or as I'd like to say, a culture-neer. You're daring to go where others aren't willing to go. The unknown doesn't scare you, it intrigues you. You're not satisfied with the status quo. Business as usual is not in your DNA. You're done with doing the same thing and expecting a different result. You're an explorer at heart and a trendsetter by nature. You were born with purpose, called to lead, destined to make a difference. You are the Culture-neer. Hey, welcome to the Culture-neer podcast. I'm your host, Terry Gwaltney, and you're in for a real treat today. Our guest, Adam Christing, is an accomplished comedian. He's a speaker, an entertainer, passion for making people laugh, bringing joy to audiences around the world. This is going to be a fun one today. Over 25 years of experience. I mean, he's performed for thousands of corporate clients, including Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits. This is going to be a hoot. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Terry. Thanks for that nice intro. Appreciate that.
Man, I'm, just our conversation off air, it makes me even more excited about just kind of diving into this. And you're fascinating, from a musician to an MC and everything in between. You may be the most unique guest we've ever had on the show.
Well, I have to be honest. I love music, but I have a background in magic, like illusion. And what I notice is there's an interesting connection. Most magicians I know are not that funny, but when you make something disappear or surprise someone, they start to laugh. And so I had an uncle who started pulling coins out of my ear when I was 9 years old, and it just captivated me. And so maybe I'm a ham for attention. I was a class clown in school. And there is an interesting phrase called show business. And so if you want to do it for a living, you have to take care of not only the show part, but the business part.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Well, we just went deep real quick. So I want to I want to lean into that just a little bit, because I'm always fascinated. It sounds like you had a couple of clues growing up that was going to shape kind of the trajectory of your life. Sounds like your uncle obviously had a huge bearing on that. And then class clown, so I think all of us have probably, if we've lived any period of our life, have learned to realize that some of what at one time we thought was our greatest weaknesses, in the middle of all that, really was some of our greatest strengths that just needed to be developed. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the early childhood and how that shaped to where you're at today and what you're doing? Just a little bit of a rewind.
Well, I'm just going to be really transparent with you. I've had so many jobs as a young man. And one night I was working as a custodian, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's an honorable role. But as I was sweeping and cleaning, I had this epiphany, like, wait a second, I could perform birthday party magic shows and make more money in 30 minutes than it might take me 5 hours doing this job. And so it was kind of and then I could do what I love to do. And it's almost become cliche, Terry, when people say, do what you love and you'll never work another day in your life. I think that's a little simplistic. You still have to work. But if you use the passions and the gifts and the talents you've been given, you're going to be in alignment. A spiritual or a religious word for that would be, follow your calling. And so as a young man, I knew I could make people laugh. I started doing magical tricks, became a youth pastor, which is almost like being a professional comedian anyway. And I started
about
to
the
realize,
same, doesn't
it? Yeah, maybe more than what comedians make. They say the difference between a comedian and a pizza is a pizza can feed a family of 4.
Oh,
and so the thing about it is you have to take what you're great at and then turn it outward. How does this benefit other people? And so at one point I quit this job I had as a very young man in my early 20s, newly married. My wife and I had no income. She was student teaching. I had quit my job, and we were taking wedding gifts back to get cash to pay our rent. But I had this, I made this commitment. I've always wanted to be an entertainer and a communicator. And so this is before social media, before you could email or text people. I started dialing for dollars. But instead of asking for money, I asked people a simple question. I would call up, for example, local high schools right in my own backyard, and I would get a hold of the principal and I'd say, Dr. Smith, I'm calling to see if I can be of service to you and your students. So it wasn't like, hey, book me, hey, give me money, hey, hire me. And he would say, well, what do you mean? And I'd say, well, I know you're teaching them about saying no to drugs. I have a program called Say No to Drugs, Say Yes to Your Dreams. So leading with how you can serve other people and create value, I think is the core of any career or
Mm,
business.
brilliant, brilliant. And so obviously you're not a struggling comedian. If people have not heard of you, uh, I think you ought to lean into that a little bit because it's pretty fascinating how you've taken that concept and that idea and how you've just applied some great business acumen and expounded your influence. Talk to us a little bit about the breadth of what you do. You're not just calling principals today to get into the school and dialing for dollars. So don't be too humble
Yeah.
here because I want the audience to hear the beginning, but I also want them to hear when you really pursue that dream and you become good at your craft. That's the thing. I think we've got a lot of brilliant people with great creative ideas. If we're honest, they're lazy in their work ethic
Mm.
and they're not willing to put the time in to really master their craft. And so they leave so much on the field that's untapped. That doesn't have to be that way. So
Well
what can you
said.
what can you lean
Yeah.
into that?
The, the last time I took my ideas to Bank of America, they wouldn't let me deposit them, right? You have to convert your ideas, you have to implement. That's really what, in my opinion, separates uh, dreamers. Nothing wrong with being a dreamer. I'm a dreamer, but doers is that one word, implementation. And
Yeah.
so I was at an event, I was emceeing an event, and this nonprofit raised several $1 million. And one of the attendees was the founder, one of the founders, the guy who came up with the formula for sun chips. But he didn't just keep it to himself in his little kitchen. He got a patent, he sold it, and it became, I think it's an over $1 billion a year business. But I asked him, I walked right up to him at a break at this conference, and I said, hey, what's been your biggest secret or takeaway? I'll never forget what he said, Terry. He said, business is relationships. And so you want to think about this question: who needs, who would benefit from my expertise, my ability, my product, my service? And then how can I serve them in a way where they keep coming back, where they refer me to other people? So
Mm,
comedians, magicians, speakers call events gigs, like getting the gigs. I don't want to just get a gig. I want to get a customer. And
yeah.
there's a really a rich word that people throw around, but I love this word, client. And if you go back to the original meaning of that word client, it means to come under the protection of another. So I know lawyers get a bad reputation, but a lawyer has a client, which means there's
Mm,
like an umbrella or a veil around that client and they're protecting them. So when I have a client, a customer, I'm not just showing up and doing my gig, I'm going deep. Tell me about your audience. Tell me about your event. Who can I have fun with? What's the mission of this meeting? And I go so deep that often the best compliment I get is, how long have you worked for our organization? Even though I'm external to their organization, I want to learn the language. I want to know the pain. I want to know how we can celebrate together. So not only go deep in your craft, but go deep into your customer base of who really needs what you're offering. And sometimes, Terry, we have to have a wake up call. Sometimes people may not need what we're great at. So we might need to morph that a little bit and reposition it, recraft it so our service matches the demand.
mm, that is so good. Yeah, I think in the society we live in, like you were talking a while ago, what you were doing pre-texting, pre-internet, would not be as near as effective today. But the
Right.
principle of what you were doing, you were willing to bury something you had a degree of success with and continue to be innovative in order that you could be relevant. Now, I think some of us, there's a lot of traps in there. We hang on to what made us successful once, maybe because of pride, maybe because an unwillingness to learn something new, and then we're frustrated with the lack of success that we're having. But a lot of times you got to be willing to let go of the old and embrace the new in order to be relevant. And it sounds like you've really learned how to do that through the years. How many decades have you been in this space?
4 decades, actually. Went full time when I
Wow.
was 22. I'm 61 now, so I guess that's 4 decades if my math holds up. Uh, yeah, and you're saying such kind things about me, but I've made every possible mistake you can make, Terry. And so my grandpa used to tell me, I respect wisdom, but I obey pain. And so when you have these painful moments, you've got to learn from them. So I'll give you one quick example. When we launched cleancomedians.com, I came up with our motto. It doesn't have to be filthy to be funny. And I love that motto. It resonated with people. And we printed about 100 brochures and we mailed them out to corporations and colleges and churches. And there was a typo. I didn't catch this.
Hmm.
And so instead of saying it doesn't have to be filthy to be funny, it said this: Clean Comedians is an association of professional comedians who believe it doesn't have to be funny. Whoops.
That's
And
pretty good. You almost
so,
think that was intentional.
yeah, yeah. So you try to rush to the post office to get those mailers back, but we have to fail forward. We're going
Uh,
to make mistakes. The real issue is, are you making the same mistakes that you were
yeah.
making a year ago, or are you learning from them?
Yeah. Well, you hit on something that's very popular for us to talk about because I really think, we all have experience that we gain from our mistakes and they're valuable. And those scars, I think, can remind us of, I don't want to go there again or remember how far
Yeah,
I've came.
right.
But then the goal, I think, is tapping into the wisdom. So if I can learn from your mistakes and your
Oh,
experience, and I
oh,
don't have to, and that's a lot of what the show is about. We're just a bunch of imperfect people trying to navigate some messy lives in order to come out on top and be productive in the end. But there's nothing about it that's perfect. And if we're willing to share some of that, wow, can that cause somebody else to skip those steps and then be able to use that influence to create a ripple effect? You know,
so
I s-
good.
I think that we're all blessed to be a blessing, and so if I can use my platform of whatever it is to help somebody else, then that's the kind of stuff that causes me to want to get up every day. And it sounds like it's the same for you.
I love what you're talking about. I've had so many mentors along the way, whether they were spiritual mentors, marketing mentors, and there have been some that I pay. I pay for their mentorship. Attend whatever you might call it, a summit or a mastermind group.
Hmm.
Jay Abraham is one of the world's greatest marketers. He's not as well known today, but he was the guy who put Icy Hot on the map as a product. He got Tony Robbins super launched. And he always came back to this idea of risk reversal, which means, how can I take the risk away from my buyer so that I take on the risk? And so I did something I don't know of another comedian has ever done. Many years ago, we came up with this thing. If it isn't funny, we'll refund your money. And so it was clean comedy. And and I think, we booked hundreds and hundreds of events. I think we might have had two people ask for a refund. And I can't even remember if that was legit or not. But chances are you're going to make it right anyway. Like if you're a
Right.
painter and they're not happy, you're either going to refund some money or you're going to repaint the house. And so why not put that up front? Why not tell your customer, hey, the risk is on me. Your satisfaction is number one. But I want to touch back on something I mentioned earlier, businesses, relationships. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm very active with email, texting, of course, all that. But some days I would very happily release all that stuff to keep about 20 relationships that I have because they're some of my best friends. Some of them are mentors. Some of them are my proteges. But I would say 80% of my business not only comes from 20%, but it comes from about 20 people. And so going deeper in those relationships,
Mm.
get on a plane if you need to and sit down and have breakfast or lunch with someone, have a face to face. Like you and I are having this face to face through, Zoom or the web. But if we were to meet and break bread together and have a meal, we would go even deeper. And then my network becomes your network. And so I strongly recommend that you're Culture-neers cultivate personal relationships. And one more nugget that just hit me is I've given a lot of speeches, but there was a man who gave way more than I ever have or probably will. His name was Russell Conwell. This is like 100 years ago, but he gave this one speech 6,000 times. And the speech was called Acres of Diamonds. And some people know about this. It's a beautiful principle. And the bottom line is the message is everything you're looking for is in your own backyard. It's relationships that you already have. It's a need that's already in your community. And so sometimes we think, well, I have to read another book. I have to get a degree. And so we're getting ready to get ready to get ready to get ready when you are ready. And you can
Mm,
get more prepared, but cultivate the relationships and serve the people right in your own backyard.
that's such great advice. And I think more businesses operated that way 30 years ago
Yeah.
than obviously what they do today. You know, the referral based business is still very much at play today, but now it's more in a form of a review where it makes it very impersonal, where
Yeah.
before it was very much word of mouth. I
My,
think,
my dad, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. Word of mouth. And word of mouth is another way of saying personal referral, right? Back to
yes,
relationships. Um, Sadly lost my dad a couple of months ago. He worked for Chevron Oil for 35 years, and he started back when you had full service, when someone would pump your gas for you, check on your oil, check your battery. And what happened was and then he moved on in the business and started putting other people into business owning these service stations, gas stations. And several of the people that he brought into business became very wealthy, not by just trying to get rich, but by serving the families in their community and getting this reputation of like, oh, you can trust Liam. Take your car to Liam because he has honest mechanics who do great work.
yeah, yeah. You were speaking earlier, I think, about clients and in your world, gigs and kind of the difference. And one of the things that super important to us in our industry is we try to get our guys to understand we are not selling a product just to make us a transaction, but
Right.
really every customer is a customer for life. And so
Oh, I
if you
love that.
approach it as a customer for life, you're not doing just enough to get them happy momentarily to be able to get them to pay you for a service, but you're thinking about doing that job in such a way and providing such a level of service that you're going to be able to sell to their grandkids. So we call it generational selling. And
That's
so,
fantastic.
as we all know, the word of mouth, the referral is an implied trust. And so I
Yes.
can spend less time of having to prove that I'm trustworthy and talk more about does my product or my service really solve the problem that you have? And half the battle is already over before we ever show up. And we all know that, it's not about creating a bunch of happy customers. That's not good enough anymore. We
Right.
really need to be creating raving fans that are willing
Yes.
to stop in a busy world and really become our ambassador and use their voice to tell other people, which is what made all the guys, obviously in these gas stations or in that industry, successful. And I think more of us as business owners need to think about that. It causes you to approach your business a different way. You know,
It
it
does.
it costs you more to do business that way.
Well, and
I
you're
think,
investing more of yourself, probably more of your resources, more of your time. Uh, I have a friend, Bob Westfall. That's a whole other story. In fact, he'd be a great podcast guest, but his company has raised well over $2 billion for nonprofits. And he started with just by himself. But here was the shift that he made, Terry, that was so powerful. He wanted to help donors move from transactional giving to
mm,
transformational giving.
oh,
And the shift was this, like, most people give to a nonprofit to make them go away, right? Like, okay, if I
mm,
give you $200, I don't have to go to the gala dinner. We're good, right? But the shift was let's deepen the relationship. Let's spend 2 or 3 days together at a hotel and hear speakers and hear the mission and be in relationship with each other. People like to give and they like to do business when they feel they're part of a community.
Mm, that is so good. Transformational. Mm, yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. It's a similar approach. One of the things that we learned early on in our business is, we wanted to be generous. We felt like that was a responsibility that we had. We had been entrusted with a trust from the community that rewarded us. We felt like we ought to be giving something back, paying it forward. But we realized somewhere in the process of that, like there's more to just giving and writing a check. What I wanted was to see opportunity for the people that were working alongside us, because they were the ones that actually helped make us successful. Equally as important, if not more so than even our customers, was our employees, was our team that was grinding that out every day. And so we switched to, okay, how can we provide an outlet where they can participate and their families could participate, because that would be transformational. And so we started with buying a concession trailer like you would see at a county fair or a food truck, with the whole purpose of, our families can come and cook and we can serve people, whether it's, a disaster area or just a give back in a community, or we could do the same thing. And if we sold the product, what we do is we come alongside another nonprofit and we give them all the proceeds. And we've seen the benefits of what was happening in our own people, I feel like, is just as impactful as the cause that they were united behind and giving back. To your point,
Yeah.
it was transformational. And my hope is it becomes generational, because we always took our own kids to events like that. And now they're adults and they have kids, and they talk about how that shaped their life and how they wanted to serve and how it impacted their generosity. And that's been a powerful point, and I think something that all of us as business owners, or just in your sphere of influence if you're working in a business, how can you connect more purpose and more mission to your employees? Because that's how
Yes.
you get engaged employees.
Yes, and sometimes we forget that it feels good to give. I almost feel like I'm selfish sometimes giving gifts. I love it so much, Terry. I try to send a gift every day to someone, and oftentimes it's a person who really can't help me in business. Yesterday, I sent a fond personal card with live postage stamp, letting this gentleman know that I thought he was funny and I appreciate him. He's not going to book me. He's not going to hire me, and maybe other good things will come of it, but just to be giving. There was a book, I think it's called Give and Take, that was a New York Times bestseller maybe 10 years ago now. The name of the author's escaping me. I think it's Adam something. Grant. I think it's Adam Grant. And it was like this big breakthrough, this big scientific research study. And really, when you boil it down to, it goes back to something that was said in the Bible, which is, it's more blessed to give than receive. That
Mm.
was essentially the nutshell of this, breakthrough book. And so going back to, and I love your concept of culture-neer. You have a culture in your heart, in your family, in your business. It's just, the question to me is, what kind of culture? You're going to
Yeah.
have a culture. Can you make it a culture that transforms people's lives, that supports those who need support, that's fun? You're going to have a culture. And one of my jobs as a comedian, I forgot to talk to you about humor, but we talked about relationships and trust. Is humor, positive humor, is a shortcut to trust. You can't be mad at somebody that you're laughing with, for example.
That's good. That's really good. Yeah, to speak back to culture, I mean, the culture you have right now, if you're listening to this today, is either one you've created intentionally or one you've allowed. Well, you do
Yeah.
have a culture, and you do have a responsibility and help shape it. Uh, I'm curious. There's an ancient proverb that says, "A merry heart does good like a medicine." Do you believe
Yeah.
that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's another example of science confirming ancient truth, right?
For
But
sure.
research truly is showing that we don't just hear a joke, for example, we feel it. When we laugh, our bodies literally release endorphins and flood us with like a happy feeling. Also, studies are showing that it creates more cohesion. So it's not only good medicine for your heart and your body, but it's great medicine for your relationships, right? You remember that saying? In fact, there was a comedian who came up with happy wife, happy
Happy
life.
life.
But when I first met my wife, what attracted me to her, I'll just tell you real quick. I was doing a card trick. I'd never met her. I didn't know who she was. I was showing some little silly card trick. And she walked up, and the first thing I remember her saying was, "Hi, I hate magic." And it just made me laugh. It's like, this is a really honest, funny person. And so we can be, just like we can be intentional about our business culture, our family culture, we can be intentional about enjoying the gift of laughter and joy. And here's what's wild about my new book. I'm kind of self congratulating here, Terry, so forgive me. But you might have heard of a book called The Five Love Languages, Gary
Yeah.
Chapman.
Hmm.
By the way, we had our 21-year-old son, James, read the book, and we said, "So, hey, buddy, what is your love language?" And he said, "Venmo." But I've
That's pretty good.
identified, yeah, he probably wanted a payment, but I've identified five humor tactics, and I call them laugh languages. And here's the thing: you don't have to be a stand-up comedian to generate fun. So I'll just hit you real quick with the five tactics or laugh languages. Surprise. Can you delight people with a gift, with something that just is unexpected? The next one is poke. This is the most challenging one. Can you poke fun at yourself and gently tease other people? The third one is wordplay. And we've noticed, in fact, I've been doing this 4 decades. I've never noticed how popular dad jokes have become again.
Yeah.
But these are like puns, witty lines, comebacks. The fourth one might be my favorite. It's called in jokes. So if you're building a business or this is part of your Rotary Club or your church, you're going to discover that there's certain people, certain sayings, and you create these in jokes that say, hey, we have some pretty cool shared experiences. Like I know someone worked at an office and they had this software like Meltdown. And I think the product was called Jar. And they started joking about who could come up with the funniest name for this thing. And someone came up with Jarmageddon. And, that would never play at a comedy club or a Netflix special. But for that group, it was an in joke that they could bond around.
Mm.
And then the last of the five humor tactics is amplify. Can you exaggerate your stories? Can you amplify the details? Can you heighten the hurt? Like if I was telling a story about myself, this is a true story, by the way, so I'm barely amplifying it. But years ago, Terry, I made a movie when I lived in Los Angeles. I raised the money. I was one of the co-stars. I was the co-director. And I thought, okay, here's my chance. I'm going to make myself an actor. And I did the shoot with the cast and everything. And when we got to the post-production, they call it the editing room, my acting was so bad I got cut out of my own movie. So, and I became the narrator. So when I tell a story like that, if I can heighten my pain, how I flopped, I become more approachable to the people that I lead and to my audiences. And so one of the things to think about is not amplifying sarcasm, which puts people down, but amplifying self-deprecating humor, like poking fun at yourself. It actually helps people like you more and feel like, oh, well, she's really like me. She's really transparent, or he's very honest. I feel like I can talk to him about my problem now. But sometimes as leaders, we feel like we need to have it all together.
Yeah. And I think it's so true what you're saying, because I think it endears people to your heart.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother level of trust that most people never approach in a professional relationship. And it makes you unique. We
Yeah.
always try to focus on, and there's an argument to be made, which is more important in the business relationship? Is it the first impression or the lasting impression? The last one. You can make an argument for each, but what I do know is people soon forget whatever you did for them, but they never forget how you made them feel.
That's
So
right.
what you're talking about is getting into an emotional level to where they really connect, So that's some powerful stuff. I'm curious, So many comedians out there have chosen to take the raunchy route. They feel
Right.
like they have to use vulgarity to get people to laugh. And you chose to entertain people with clean comedy. Why did you choose that path, and why is that so important to you?
I'll never forget this experience I had. I was a young dad, so I think my son was 5. My dad was probably at the time 55, and my grandfather was probably 85. And so you had 4 generations sitting down in a living room, and we were watching an old Laurel and Hardy movie, and we were all busting up. And there was no profanity, there was no sexual innuendo, there was no swearing. It was silly slapstick stuff, and it hit me. It's like, you know what, the family room is funnier than the restroom. So I think what happened over time
Mm,
is comedy does a shock, it does surprise, but what's happened is it's become harder and harder to surprise people. So people got raunchier, and meaner. You go to some comedy clubs now, it's not even really a monologue. It's like an angry rant. Can I out
mm,
anger you? Can I get more gross than you are? And I'll tell you something that really blew me away. But I thought for many years that being a person of faith was not consistent with doing comedy. But I read this book called The Humor of Christ, which was fascinating. And he identified, I think it's 32 times, where Jesus used sarcasm, irony, storytelling, exaggeration. Like when he says, hey, why do you try to take a little speck of dust out of your friend's eye when you've got a big log jutting out of your own eye? Well, we don't laugh at that today because it's like, oh, this is, in the Bible. But I bet he got laughs when he said that, because he's using the tools of a humorist there. And so I believe that all of life is spiritual, whether you're at work or you're at home or you're in your car. And it doesn't mean you have to be perfect. Nope, nobody is. But don't create these compartments. And so I wanted the way
yeah.
I was as a dad to also be reflected in the way I worked as a comedian or a speaker.
Mm. Well, you've done a good job with it, and it's definitely a need that I think that needed to be met. And how wide? Give us an understanding, a glimpse into how wide your organization is. Like, how many people do you have? How big is that need that you're helping meet out there? I think it'd blow the
Oh,
audience away.
it's such a huge need. You think about every group that has an event: business, nonprofit, college, church, private parties. It's almost endless, thousands of events. And so everybody wants to laugh, but if you bring in a raunchy or a prejudiced type of a comedian or someone who's just putting people down, it's like you just made your event not so much fun. And so we were blown away. I had really no business experience. I started studying marketing, but we just started opening the doors, and we came up with this no gross policy, Terry, which was no gender bashing, no racial jokes, no obscenity, no sexual innuendo, which was the hardest for some comedians, because like, well, I'm not saying dirty words, but they were planting
Mm,
these thoughts in the audience mind. And what's the last one? No swearing. So even like, almost like Andy Griffith show level clean. And our other little saying was, if in doubt, leave it out. Nobody comes. I've never once had someone come up to me after a comedy presentation, go, I really enjoyed that, but I wish it had been dirty. Or could you have done 20 minutes of jokes making fun of this ethnic group? I've never had that. And so in the comedy business, even in Hollywood, there's a great saying, which is funny is funny.
mm,
And I really believe that laughter is a gift. One of the things I'm trying to do with the new book is help people understand that as a human being, you are also a humor being. You do have a sense of humor. Doesn't mean you're
mm.
necessarily a joke teller, but you might tap into the power of wordplay or in jokes, and everyone has the ability to surprise someone, and you will get laughs.
Oh, that's good. I'm curious, your opinion. What role do you think comedy plays in just helping people process through trauma or grief? Because I really do believe a merry heart does good like a medicine. How have you seen that role, and can jokes really help heal people?
Yeah, it's really something. There's direct link to your health and humor. I mean, I think it was Norman Cousins who prolonged his life when he was a cancer patient. He wrote a book about it called The Anatomy of an Illness, which is not a very fun title, but he would watch comedy videos, and he noticed this correlation between his laughing and feeling better. And so I encourage people. Here's an example. I have people do this when I do live events. If I could see or hear your whole audience right now, Terry, I would do this. But I have people stand up at an event and put a big smile on their face. And I say, even if it's kind of a fake, I'm at a conference smile, and I have them put their hands up toward the ceiling and look up. And what I challenge them to do is now, while you're smiling, while you're looking up, big smile on your face, try to feel bad. And everybody just starts laughing. You can't really do it. And so sometimes we just sit back and wait, like, okay, make me laugh, funny boy, or we turn on a Netflix special and hope that it makes us laugh. But we can choose to be joy makers, is what I would say. We can choose to delight other people. We can surprise them. And it's like a boomerang. It comes back and makes you feel better.
Mm. Yeah. You had an amazing run. What's next? Are you cooking up another special? You're writing another book? Do your own podcast? Direct another show? You're going to try the actor thing again? I mean,
I'm afraid to try the actor thing again, but I might. No, I love, like you do, I love ideas. But the big thing that I'm focusing on now is this concept of the laughter factor, that humor is a bridge. And so this book is being released internationally. In fact, next week I go to a studio in Asheville, North Carolina, and record the audio for the book. And I had to audition for that, Terry. I had to audition to be the reader for my own book. So I'm glad I passed that audition. And we're starting this thing called Laugh Launchers. And we actually had our first meeting last night at the time that we're recording this. And we had about 25 people, and we're laughing. We just spent 30 minutes. We're laughing. We're sharing strategies about how you can be a joy maker at work and at home. And we're spreading the word that, like you said, laughter, a merry heart does good like medicine.
Mm. So is your book available now?
The book is released September 16th, 2026. And if people want to read, get a sneak preview, and I've got a little video clip, they can go to thelaughterfactor.com. Don't forget the word thelaughterfactor.com.
That's awesome. I look forward to getting a copy of that. So do we have time for a quick lightning round?
Yeah, I love lightning rounds. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. The worst gig ever.
When I was introduced and the person said, our wonderful manager of 25 years passed away. Services will be next Tuesday. And now let's welcome Adam. That was a tough one.
That's a steep hill to climb. How about best city for comedy?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm going to say Arthur, Illinois, because one of my favorite clients is there, Tri-County Welding. And so it's not a comedy club. It's they do a Christmas supper where they celebrate their people.
That's awesome. And that's not too far from me. So I may have to check that out. Comedian you'd kill to open for?
Oh, well, I had a dream come true just about 2 years ago, and I got to work with Martin Short, who is so hysterically funny and was very gracious to me. But, one of my favorites might be Stephen Wright, because he's a master of wordplay. It would be an honor to open for Stephen Wright. If you've never checked out his stuff, I think it was the only comedian back in Johnny Carson's heyday who got booked twice in the same week because he was so funny. Stephen Wright, Wright. Yeah.
Most unexpected place you've ever found a joke? It's got to be good.
Oh. Well, this one's awkward, but I would say it was in my own restroom where I was grabbing a book, and it was something I had written down 10 years earlier in the back of the book, and it made me laugh. And it actually became the title of the last book I did, which is called Your Life is a Joke, 12 Ways to Go from Ha-Ha to Aha.
Oh, that's pretty good. I'm gonna have to get a copy of that. I'm a reader, so
Good,
my
good.
library is growing since we've been talking today. And the last one, a joke you wish you had written.
Oh, wow. You know, I mentioned Stephen Wright. He has some funny short jokes, but he said, I'll just give you one example. He said, I put spot remover on my dog. Now he's gone.
It's pretty good.
I mean, it's like one sentence, but it's got a punch right there.
It makes you think.
Yeah.
So I know you do a lot of corporate stuff. Tell leaders today how using you and comedy can have a positive impact on their organization, because you could be a great resource and tool, I think, to many of our listeners today.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. You touched on it when I think we've been talking about a quote that I think goes back to Maya Angelou, where she says, "It's how you make people feel." Right. So sometimes people think, "Well, I'll just put some entertainment at the end of dinner." But if you have a professional MC, for example, who can weave in humor, because I don't think your people are sitting back going, "Hey, give us more content. We want more content." They want more connection. And
Mm.
so by bringing in a clean comedian, a professional MC, an expert, a funny keynote speaker, not only will they retain the information you want them to retain more likely, but they're going to walk away with a sweet taste in their mouth, right? So I have one client who has booked me, it's hard to believe, over 200 times for different nonprofit organizations. And it's not because I'm the funniest guy in the world. As you could tell from this podcast, I'm not, but because I probably care more than just about any other comedian or MC they've worked with. And my goal is to have people walking out of their meeting going, I can't wait to do this again next year.
Mm. Mm. So, in your opinion, if a team laughs together, uh, do you think they perform better together?
No question. In fact, there's a recent Oxford study that confirms this, many other studies that confirm that what happens when we laugh is not only to become more playful, but we become more productive. And
Mm.
I have zero musical talent, as I mentioned, but I think about arguably the most successful band of all time, the Beatles, right?
Mm.
And when you think about it, they had all these elements. You know, you might say John was the mind, Paul was the heart, George was the soul, Ringo was the flesh and blood. So maybe what made them the most popular band of all time is they brought all those elements together. So I think
Mm.
if you want, as a leader, if you want your people to feel connected, not only do you need to encourage fun and transparent communication, but learn what makes other people laugh, not just what you think is funny, but
Mm.
tap into. So I tell leaders to lead through listening. When I'm emceeing an event, you've heard the saying, read the room. It's deeper than that. It's like feel the room. I'm not going to do a joke if someone's just sharing about a loss in their family or a divorce. I'm going to listen first. I had a wonderful Irish grandmother who used to share this proverb. She would say, God gave you two ears and one mouth. And as leaders, we need to remember that we need to listen more than we talk.
Yeah. I think that's a message for us as husbands,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
listening on the level to where you're listening for the emotion behind the words. I think
that's right.
same thing applies with our employees. What's one piece of advice you'd leave with our listeners today on how they can improve the culture of their organization? If you had to give them just one, maybe
Yeah, it
you
might
just
be a,
did.
yeah, it might be a surprising one. I'll be very honest about my own leadership. I think sometimes we give what we also need to receive, right?
Mm.
So make sure you're not only, for example, for me, I know that I can make people laugh. It's what I do. But sometimes I get so serious about marketing and business and hiring and training. It's like, wait a second, I'm in the funny business. I need to also enjoy this stuff. So let's say it goes back to the old saying, the shoemaker's kids have no shoes, right? So sometimes we're focused on building someone a great house or selling the best cars. And maybe I would put it this way, make sure you buy what you're selling too.
Mm. No, that's good. Authentic. So how does Adam want to be remembered when your life is over here on the earth, we just might as well leave this with something deep. Like, what kind of mark do you want to leave that can't be erased?
Wow, that's heavy duty.
I saved it for the end.
I have to think about my dad's recent passing. I thought about what am I going to share about my dad, and this is how I also want to be remembered. It wasn't that he worked for Chevron for 35 years. It wasn't he won an award as Salesman of the Year. I mean, those are all great things, but he always showed up. He showed up for his country, served the Army, showed up for my mom, and stayed true to her for, I don't know, 60 years. I think they were married. Showed up as a dad, showed up as a grandpa, showed up early for work. And so I want to be remembered as someone who just shows up.
Mm. Well, it's super admirable. Adam, I appreciate your time today. I think it's been not just informational, but it's really been inspirational for the people that are listening. And I encourage you, if you're listening to this today, bringing somebody like Adam in and his organization is something that is an investment, not a cost for your organization. And I just encourage you, if you'll invest in your people, then they're going to invest in what's important to you, which is your business. And your customer experience will never be greater than your employees' experience. And here's a way to be able to invest back in them. Remember, guys, your culture is only as healthy as the leader. We'll see you next time on the Culture-neer podcast.
Thank you for joining us on Culture-neer, where every episode is a step forward on your leadership journey. We hope today's conversation sparked new insights and added real value to your life, empowering you to lead with greater strength and purpose. If you enjoyed what you heard, please connect with us. Follow our Facebook and Instagram pages, subscribe to our YouTube channel for exclusive content, and give us a rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Your support helps us grow our community and continue delivering conversations that matter. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep striving, keep leading, and keep inspiring.